big news today or yesterday. There's been a lawsuit coming down, NCAA versus House. I'm not sure who House is, but that's why we're having you on. I guess in the Power 5 conferences, all the chancellors, everyone's approved that you will be able to pay athletes directly, not through NIL, but just like paychecks. Like amateurism is officially dead in college football. What do you know about the case, and can you explain it, because there's so many questions that need to be answered?
Yeah, I've been digging into this for a little bit. We actually got a text from a coach. I won't say who the coach was, but we got a text from a coach that said, you guys should dig into this and this House versus NCAA case, because it's going to change everything. And I probably won't be able to pay out the NIL deals that we've made for our recruits coming in the coming years. So that's why I started digging into this a couple days ago before everything was settled. They had already kind of had the settlement on the table when I started listening to different shows and reading different articles and stuff. But essentially what it is the athletes that missed out on NIL, but they could only go back to from 2016 to 2020 is what it is. It's kind of like a weird statute of limitations. I have no idea how it works. I don't know how they can say, hey, we missed out on this money. But I believe House is a swimmer. I don't know. I don't remember what school, but House is a swimmer.
Money?
What's that? Yeah.
Those dudes money.
He sued somebody.
Damn. Well, that's the thing is, once you get to a certain point in your career, I mean, the TV revenue is there, right? Like whether it's Big 12 network or whatever it is, right? Because even though those big revenue share type deals happen with football and basketball in mind, those lower tier teams that are on campus, they're pulled into it, right? So that's how we get a North Carolina State on ACC network for wrestling, right? It's how we get a lot of those things, even though ESPN didn't even want ACC network in the first place, but that's a story for a different day. But
so Ryan, let me ask you this real quick, right out of the gate with the swimmer. So is this only pertaining to football, or is this athletes across the board in Power 5, or is this only a football thing?
No, this is athletes across the board. So it's crazy because the lawsuit itself was aimed at the NCAA and the Power 5 conferences. But when you look at the breakdown, the non-Power 5 conferences are paying like 36% of the back pay. So it's pretty wild because the NCAA has to pay like 40%. And then the Power 5s, I think, have the 24%. And then the rest of it is non-Power 5 or like non-big football schools and stuff like that. So it's pretty crazy. Like athletes going back to 2016 are the ones that are eligible, because obviously NIL came in 2021. So it's 2016 to 2020, like I mentioned. But it's like if they didn't settle this case, NCAA, I mean, the NCAA is basically done now with all this. Yeah. The NCAA would have been completely bankrupt. It would have cost $20 billion to pay all this, like crazy astronomical amounts of money. They settle for almost $3 billion. And like I said, the NCAA is going to pay like $1.2 billion of that.
So who they paying this money to?
It goes to past and current athletes. So it'll go to, like I said, athletes from 2016 to 2020, but then athletes that are still in college now as well. So like guys that are now in the pros that came out from 2016 to 2020 that couldn't, make money off their name, image, and likeness while in college, they're going to get a check. And there's like some, like there's some like algorithm that they're going to use. I don't know whose rankings they're going to use, but like if you're like a 5-star, that will be taken into account in the equation.
I've heard that.
However, your stars for your recruiting is going to be taken into account. Your career snaps is going to be another thing. And then I have a bunch of notes written down. And then like, what else is in here? Player rating. So the stars, then that's going to decide like your market value. So there's going to be a lot of different factors. They're going to bring in like a sports economist to figure out truly how this equation is going to work with all those different variables and all those different factors.
It's pretty wild. Crazy. I mean, when is the last time the NCAA has won anything in court. Their lawyers are getting their nuts kicked in.
The funny thing is that it's been against the same judge.
Really?
Yeah. So the judge that decided this one,
he never got it.
He never
yeah. Yep. And that was like a big deal because the judge decided this one, decided like other cases, decided the original NIL case. So she's gone against the NCAA a number of times. So that's why they were like, oh, we're screwed. We better somehow figure out how to settle this case. Because if we don't, we're done. Right. That's a wrap for the NCAA.
So now, you will be able to get an NIL. So this is where a lot of confusion is. NIL deals are not paid by the university. Isn't it an alumni that owns a Harris Tweeter or a freaking Carl's Jr. that lets DJ do some biscuit commercials? I don't understand. I thought NIL was paid not through the university, but through jobs and advertising and stuff like that. I'm sort of confused on this.
Yeah, you're right. So NIL it cannot have any affiliation up until this settlement, which is still not done yet. So they may have settled, but it still has to be approved by a judge, and then it has to go to literally all the different athletes that would be a part of this entire settlement have to approve it as well. Within the lawsuit, there was like 14,000 athletes that were just part of the lawsuit.
Wow.
So like they all have to like approve it and everything else. So even though there was a settlement, it's still not done yet. It's going to take a while for all of this to happen. Cause like once it goes to them, it takes like 30 to 45 days and everything else. But NIL, they had deemed that there was no pay for play. So the universities couldn't be involved. So that wasn't allowed either. But now it's going to change a lot of stuff. So there's going to be rev share involved. There's going to be tickets involved. There's going to be, a bunch of different things with, the broadcast that is going to be involved. And that's all going to go into, the back pay and the damages. So like it was an antitrust lawsuit. And the funny thing about it is this wasn't the only one. It was just the first one. So there were two other cases that once this got settled, they actually said that this case will then settle the other cases. There's two. It's like Hubbard versus NCAA and Carter versus NCAA that are the two others outside of House versus NCAA. And then there's another one that is brought up in Colorado, which is Fontenot versus NCAA, where they tried to move it into this so that they'd be able to settle this one too, but they were not allowed to move it. But it'll set precedent, and that one will probably get rolled up into this anyway. But yeah, I mean, there's a bunch of different cases that have been a part of this, and they're now all settled, or at least going to be settled because of it. And part of the settlement is that athletes cannot sue the NCAA for antitrust anymore.
Ooh.
I don't know how long that is. I don't know if it's just like these specific athletes or if it's like in general for, in perpetuity. There was really no note on that.
Let me ask you this, because I've heard something like this, that NCAA is giving all Power 5 universities like 20 something million to start off with. Now, is this a sort of a cap thing where you have a football team, Alabama's getting 25 million, North Carolina, Texas getting 25 million, and then that they have to spread that out to their athletes? Is that what's going on here? Is it something completely different?
So the schools can opt into like the revenue distribution model. And that's how and then the schools will determine who gets paid and who doesn't. So if you're some, fourth string quarterback that just gets his ass kicked all practice, chances are you're just getting free lunch and, you're basically in jail, but your hot meals a day and your free bed and your books, and that's about it. Right. Like they're not going to be paying you part of this rev share, but if you're the star quarterback, you're getting rev share, you're getting the nice treatment. But it's the $20 million figure from what I read was just the number that was like a ballpark. It's going to be north of 20 million of what it's going to cost the schools every single year. So like that is going to be a very big deal. And with the 2.8 million or almost 3 million or 3 billion that they're going to have to pay. That's going to be paid over 10 years. So it's not like they're just going to be stroking checks for, from here until the end of time. It's going to be, 10 years that they have to get all this back pay out.
So
what are they doing to those checks, Ryan?
They're stroking them. Pause.
No,
So-
diggity.
So does this go into recruiting? Like when you recruit, are you saying we're offering you this? We're offering you, $6 million. Is that what we're getting into here?
Yeah.
That's crazy.
It also, so within this, it also gets rid of roster limits, not just for players, but for coaches as well. So you can have an unlimited amount of coaches. So if you want 150 football players, you can have 150 football players. So that's like the crazy part about it is like it gets rid of roster limits. And there's another, I think it's like another part of it. I don't know if it's part of this lawsuit, but it's something that I read where you're going to be able to have basically like unlimited coaching staffs. And they're not going to be able to tell you
it with all those players. He's not going to be able to have The Rock on the sideline and all those players.
He's gonna
I think that smart coaches will institute their own roster limits, honestly, because you're going to have to, right? Like you're really going to have to. And not only that, it's now going to be even bigger bidding wars. And even though, and you mentioned before, like schools weren't allowed to be involved with NIL deals or anything else like that. But now, those collectives will basically kind of be an extension of the athletic departments, and your athletic departments are going to get even smaller too. So that's going to be an even bigger deal. I think it was Texas A&M preemptively got rid of like 15 people in their athletic department to prepare for this, because they knew we're going to have to be, paying a lot of these people, a lot of these kids and these athletes to start to come here, so anything that Johnny Manziel was making when he was there, tenfold now.
That's crazy. So let's get to brass tacks here. How are the fans going to see college football change? What's going to change about Ohio State? What's going to change about Alabama? What are we going to see differently? Because everyone's saying how crazy this is and how different this is going to be. I can see the NCAA not lasting very long, but how do you see football being changed like they're saying?
They're already talking about a power conference, like a super conference, essentially, where it's, it is the Alabamas, the Michigans. I'm sure Notre Dame has been a man without an island for a very long time, but if they create a super conference, I'm sure Notre Dame will be in, right? Like they're one of those big time teams that they only joined the ACC during the COVID year so that they could, go off to the playoffs, right? Or at least have a schedule, because at that point you were only allowed to play your conference schedule, and they didn't have a conference, so they had to join for 1 year. But they're already talking about changing football to the point where it is a super conference, and you're gonna have to really truly figure it out. What's that?
Maybe 40 schools or something.
Yeah. I don't know what the number is going to be on it, but yeah, it's going to change significantly. And I think even within that, you're going to have to change the CFP, right? The playoff is going to be completely changed. We're getting 12 teams this year. Who knows what's going to happen to
12
it?
already?
It's 12.
It'll be 12 this year.
Since we're talking about this, I don't know if you're familiar with it. I'm not too familiar with it, but I saw. So the kid from Colorado who went to Florida.
Yeah.
They're not giving him a scholarship, but it seemed like Florida's paying him.
Yes.
Right? So it's like an NIL deal. Is that what he's getting? But he's not getting the scholarship. So he's going to have to pay for it out of his own pocket?
Yeah, but they deemed him a walk-on. And as soon as they did that, they're like, wait a second, a 5-star recruit at a high school is a walk-on at Florida. And they're like, well, they're like, now we got to look into taking walk-ons away, because what's going to stop, because that's why unlimited roster limits are going into effect, because now you can say, okay, I have my 85 scholarships that I've given out, and now instead of my 85 scholarships, I have unlimited scholarships, because what I can do is I can go to my collective and I can say, hey, we have this kid coming down the pipeline, this kid, we're already at 85, but we really want this kid to come on. Let's give him an NIL deal that essentially will pay for his tuition, but then gives him, even, X amount of money in his pocket. So that's why they're looking at getting rid of walk-ons, because it's just a workaround of saying, okay, here's my allotted scholarships. I've hit my allotment. Now let's just pay this kid, because it is basically then pay for play.
My goodness, man. This is,
Wow.
this is big. It's big. And that's why I wanted you to come on here and try to explain it. But we know football. Is this going to bleed down to, basketball, baseball?
I don't think they mess with basketball.
No, I don't think they mess with basketball either.
I don't think they mess with basketball ever. March Madness is so big that it's
so successful.
Yeah, and so successful. It's too.
March Madness was a really big subset of this. That it was kind of part of the reasoning behind it. So, like I said, House was a swimmer, but there were basketball players that were in here that would have made so much money off of March Madness. March Madness is like their biggest rev gen in the country, right? So that's how the NCAA like makes a ton of money, is off their rev gen. So like that was a big deal too. So basketball won't be touched, I don't think. Football obviously won't be touched. That's like, those are your tier one. I think it'll be broken down into tiers, and we're gonna see sports get cut, right? Like that's the thing that really sucks, is in order for them to put up 20 million a year, which is literally just an estimate, and they said it's probably going to be north of that. In order to really be able to do something with that, they're gonna have to fire a lot of coaches, drop a lot of sports. It's kind of inevitable, right? You're going to be looking at the Olympic sports.
Oh, the Olympic sports are first to go. The non-money makers.
Yes.
So the
last time
water polo.
When's the last time you wanted to go see a fencing match?
Never.
Yeah.
Never. So the water polo is going to be out, maybe.
Most likely. The crazier one for me was track. Like I was seeing that in a lot of conferences.
Get rid of that.
Like it's. I don't think that track. I think track has a possibility of being cut at certain universities. It won't be cut at Oregon for damn sure, with Phil Knight money and how he ran at Oregon and all the money that goes into sports there. Like Nike's going to come in somehow on these things. Big donors and are going to come in somehow. There's going to be something that has to happen in order for schools to at least not cut just everything and say we are just a football and basketball and maybe a baseball school, right? Like it's going to be tough. It's going to be really tough, but those are the sports that are going to stick around, are the ones that everybody's watching.
Did Nick Saban, I mean, is he a genius? Did he see this coming down the pipeline? He's like, I am out.
I think Nick was out when he probably had so many kids asking him, where's my bag for coming to Bama, right?
That's
like,
he mentioned something like that.
Yeah,
you get tired of it for sure.
But the playing time when they were freshmen, he didn't like.
Yeah. So they haven't had a class in a while that hasn't been looking for money. But I mean, this is going to change a lot of stuff. And the NCAA is they're kind of leaving it open to the point where, and obviously the NCAA is a corrupt, company. They're completely corrupt. They're leaving it open to work with Congress so that they can get an antitrust exemption, which they used to have. But like the whole gripe was that the NCAA went to TV broadcasters and these Power 5 schools and these TV broadcasters and these conferences, and the NCAA all colluded to keep college athletes amateur. So like that was like the whole big part of it, which is where the antitrust all came in, because it was basically without athletes knowing, it was their own conferences, their own schools, and then the TV companies and the NCAA against them for the longest time without them knowing. And that's why they were being kept as amateurs.
Well, I don't know if that answers any questions.
That's just a whole lot of shit going on.
That is crazy. That is crazy. But thank you for breaking that down.